Welcome back to Inside the Trenches. We're going to jump into the second part of our mock draft for 2017. We're going to start with the 6th overall pick. We did our picks 1 through 5 last week. The 6th overall pick, and the Jets are on the clock. Who do you have them picking, Noah?
Yeah, so the Jets, to me it was interesting. They have a lot of needs.
You could say that again.
But the guy that I have them taking doesn't seem like a huge need. Maybe right now, but when you think long term, it could be a big need. And the guy I have them taking is Leonard Fournette. Again, like I said, not a big need right now. They have Matt Forte, but he's getting up there in age. And Leonard Fournette is a guy that, if you have him on your team, he can change your offense. He's not really a pass catching guy, but that's fine. They have Bilal Powell.
And Matt Forte is a specialist in pass catching at running back.
Exactly. So that really isn't a big factor. Leonard Fournette, to me, is the best running back in the draft. I just think the Jets, if they want to change their offense, they'll go with Leonard Fournette.
I have thought about that pick a lot, of Leonard Fournette going to the Jets. I'm definitely not a fan of it, but I definitely could see it happening. Although I would be a little surprised, just because I think other teams are a little bit more running back needy than the Jets, and with a team that has so many needs, I just don't think they're going to try and pick a guy at a position that isn't as big of a need, especially when that's a pretty deep position in this draft. There's a lot of good running backs. I just don't think that makes sense for them round 1. And also, I already have Leonard Fournette off the board in my mock draft. So with the 6th overall pick, I have them replacing Darrelle Revis with Marshawn Lattimore, the corner from Ohio State. I think that cornerback is going to be a really, really big need for the Jets. If you watched them last year, they put Darrelle Revis, who looked pretty washed up, still as their first corner. They left a washed up guy who was getting burnt all over the field as their number 1 corner. You take that away, and what does that give you? So you had guys who were backing up a guy getting burnt all year. I think you need a corner really bad. I think Marshawn Lattimore can start day 1 and be your best corner on the team.
Cornerback is a need for the Jets, but like you said with the running back position, corner is a fairly deep position also in this draft. So the next pick is the Los Angeles Chargers. And the Chargers, they have some needs on defense, especially on defense. So I went with Malik Hooker at safety. They lost Eric Weddle a couple years ago, and that was a big hit for them. So I think they're going to want another guy to replace him, even though he's been gone for a while now. And Malik Hooker is possibly the best safety, him or Jamal Adams, who I had going to Tennessee at 5. So I went with Malik Hooker.
I actually went with Malik Hooker as well. So this is the first time since the 1st overall pick we have actually agreed on a pick. Yeah. They definitely have a big need at safety. You kind of took the words out of my mouth. I was thinking, since Eric Weddle left just over a year ago, that position has not been even nearly the same. You had a Pro Bowl talent leave, and you didn't replace it with much. Now, I thought last year Jalen Ramsey could be an option at that pick for them. They didn't go that direction. They got their pass rusher in Joey Bosa, and that's worked out pretty well. So now you have the opportunity to make up for the pick you didn't make last year, even though it didn't go poorly, but you can get a guy on that same level of talent to pair with Joey Bosa. So you have Malik Hooker, who is a more natural free safety than strong safety. He's really rangy and athletic, can chase the ball all over the field. Think of a center fielder in baseball. That's kind of what he is, but he only started for about 1 year in college, so there's a good opportunity for him to get more playing experience, but he might not be great right off the bat, but he definitely could start for them day 1. So with, oh, sorry, you want to add to that?
I was just going to say Chargers, by the way, could be a Super Bowl sleeper pick.
Really?
Could be, according to my dad.
Okay, well, tell your dad I am still sleeping on that, and I will probably sleep on that through the next year. The 8th overall pick, the Carolina Panthers. What a fall from grace, going from the 31st overall pick a year ago to the 8th pick. Definitely not the same team they were a year ago. And actually, a funny story about that, I read that Ron Rivera had argued against the idea of Falcons and Patriots playing each other to open the season this year, because his argument was that last year it took his team the entire offseason to get over losing the Super Bowl, and when they lost to Denver in week 1, it killed their mojo for the rest of their season. So I thought that was an interesting little tidbit.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting.
With the 8th overall pick, I have the Panthers going defensive end with Derek Barnett from Tennessee. You're shaking your head. Do you have the same pick?
I don't. I thought about it.
I was wondering if we had the same pick there. I have them picking Derek Barnett. I think they could use another pass rusher off the edge. Their defense is a pretty good defense, pretty good core, but they lost a couple pieces, and I think they're just trying to make back up for them. Derek Barnett's not your guy who's going to switch between standing up and having his hand on the ground. He's going to have his hand on the ground most of the time, but that's the way the Panthers like to use their pass rushers, and I think he fits their scheme very well.
Yeah, I thought about going Derek Barnett, but they re-signed Charles Johnson, and to me, Derek Barnett isn't that same type of guy like Jonathan Allen, who when I have going to the Jaguars, who people might think, okay, that's a bit of a stack at defensive line.
Now remember something, they did trade Coney Ealy this offseason, who was a Super Bowl MVP candidate. I thought would have won it if the Panthers had won the game. They traded him to the Patriots, so they did lose a pass rusher.
That is true. But like I said, I decided to not go with defensive line. My second thought was defensive back, and I thought, okay, their corners were not good last year, but they were both rookies, and my thought process was, okay, they have 2 rookie corners. I think they're going to want to see them develop some more. So I didn't go defensive back either. I decided to go running back with Dalvin Cook, because they did re-sign Jonathan Stewart and Fozzie Whitaker. However, they only re-signed Jonathan Stewart to 1 year. So I feel like they're going to want to go running back for the future. And Dalvin Cook is arguably the best, probably second best after Leonard Fournette in this draft. So, and he's a style that they like. He's sort of a D'Angelo Williams type guy. So I think Dalvin Cook goes to the Panthers at 8.
I thought about that pick as well. I just felt like it was a little high for Dalvin Cook, and I thought maybe the Panthers, while I do think running back is one of the biggest needs on their team, I think it's something they're going to wait and get in the 2nd or 3rd round. I think it could still be an early pick for them, just maybe not a top 10 pick. Moving on to the 9th pick, and this is where I really started thinking about what could the Bengals do to shake up this draft a little bit. So they've had some failures picking linebackers recently, but they do have an older linebacking core. They have a couple needs on the defensive line. I didn't make this pick, but I got really close. Now hear me out. I almost put John Ross going 9th overall to the Bengals. Now here's the thought on that. AJ Green's a stud. Who plays on the other side of the field from him? Okay, that's my point. We've seen time and time again receivers get moved up draft boards because of their speed. John Ross is now the fastest player in the history of the Combine. It will not surprise me at all to see him go in the top half of the 1st round. He is really fast, and it's not like he's just fast. He's actually a good receiver too, and he's actually a pretty good scoring threat in the red zone. He was a good red zone threat in college. Pair that on the other side of AJ Green, you could really have a deadly duo. Now, I didn't make that pick, but I really wanted to. I just couldn't talk myself into it enough. But I think that's something to consider going into this draft, is that John Ross could maybe move up this high in the draft. What I did decide to go with was Reuben Foster, the linebacker from Alabama. I think it makes more sense. I think it's the safer pick, and I think it makes more sense for what the Bengals are trying to do. I think if you put Reuben Foster next to Vontaze Burfict, while they both have some character concerns, the Bengals have shown recently they don't really care too much about character concerns. They'll take the risk on a guy with character concerns if he can play, and Reuben Foster can definitely play. He might not be a guy that's going to be on the field all 3 downs. He might just be a 1st and 2nd down guy, but he's definitely a thumper, and I think he's going to be excellent at stopping the run.
I thought about Reuben Foster, but then I thought, okay, he's a little bit more of an inside type guy. That's a little more of his style, and they really need more of an outside guy. So I decided to go with defensive line Solomon Thomas, who I think you had going earlier.
2nd overall, actually.
Well, I go Solomon Thomas at 9 to the Bengals. I mean, he's a good pass rusher. He's a guy who's going to come off the edge and attack the quarterback. To me, he kind of reminds me of a Leonard Floyd, even though Leonard Floyd's more of a linebacker. To me, he's similar to him, and he worked out really well in Chicago. So I think Solomon Thomas to the Bengals will help out that defensive line, and that's my number 9 pick.
At number 10 overall, and the last pick of today's mock draft, the Buffalo Bills. What I ended up picking here, I kind of went along with many mock drafts in this scenario. I think it would be very beneficial for them to pick up another wide receiver, so I went with Mike Williams from Clemson to pair with the other Clemson wide receiver they already have in Sammy Watkins. Watkins gets hurt more often than he probably should, and when he goes down, they don't really have very many viable receiving threats on the field, and they definitely could use another one. And when Watkins is healthy, you have a really good duo now. So Mike Williams going to a team that was ranked 30th in the league in passing last year, that's not good. They weren't even averaging 200 passing yards a game last season. So they really need to spice up their passing game a little bit. I think corner is another big need with Stephon Gilmore leaving, but I think that when you're ranked 30th in something in the league and you have your best player at that in that aspect of the game gets hurt a lot, you really need to shore it up. Now I think one interesting option here for them, and their coach had mentioned that the number 2 receiver on their team was already on the roster, so maybe they're not thinking Mike Williams. I think another way to boost that receiving game is O.J. Howard here, the tight end from Bama. He can come in and be a really good red zone threat for you, but also they had the number 1 ranked running game in the NFL last year, and he's a great run blocker as well. He can help boost something you're already good at and then pick up the slack at something you're poor at. So I think that's something to keep in mind, but I think Mike Williams makes more sense.
Yeah, I also went with Mike Williams. Pretty much the same exact reasons you said. I mean, they have Sammy Watkins, but he gets hurt a lot. And besides Sammy Watkins, they don't really have anybody nearly close to that level. So I went with Mike Williams. He's another similar style as Sammy Watkins, so that's something that they like. And when you have Tyrod Taylor, who has shown that he could be a good passer, but without Sammy Watkins, he can't really do too much. So I went with another receiver for them. I do like the O.J. Howard thought there, but my only thing is I have a feeling that they really like who they have there, Charles Clay.
I like Charles Clay a lot.
I like Charles Clay. He's a really fast guy. He's not too big, but
he's more of an H-back, so he's like a fullback tight end combo.
Yeah. I think they like him in that spot. So I went Mike Williams pretty much because they need a receiver, and their other needs aren't really as bad. A cornerback maybe, now that they lost Stephon Gilmore, but they really don't need anything too bad.
I think that Mike Williams makes their offense pretty scary. I'm not going to lie. I think it makes them a lot more less one-dimensional. Right now, they really rely on their run game and Sammy Watkins. He really kind of opens up your offense quite a bit. I mean, I don't know if you remember watching the national championship game. Deshaun Watson played the game of his life, but let's not act like Mike Williams did not bail him out like 7 different times in that game, especially there towards the end of the game in those last couple drives. He threw up some passes that were a little hard to catch, and Mike Williams made some phenomenal catches to help them win that football game. So I think he's a big-time player that can play in the big-time moment as well. There's a couple names here I want to mention that have not gone in our top 10, and these are guys that I'm kind of interested to see where they're actually going to fall on draft day. I think they're top 10 talents, O.J. Howard being one of them. In a way, I would be shocked if he didn't go in the top 10 because I think he's that good. I just don't know if he fits the needs here because the guys we just listed, these are really good guys. This is a really good draft class, in my opinion. So when you see a guy like O.J. Howard, who in other years could maybe even be a top 5 pick, I think he's that talented, not even in the top 10, it's kind of surprising. Another name, Jonathan Allen, not in my top 10. Was he in yours?
He was, yeah, to Jacksonville.
I think he is one of the maybe 5 most talented players in this draft class. I just don't know if he's going to fit the right need for some of these teams where defensive backs and pass rushers are the biggest need, and a guy like him that might play defensive tackle or a 3-4 defensive end, not as a premier position. So that might be the reason he slips out of the top 10. So there's a couple big names missing from the top 10 here, at least on my list, that kind of shocked me when I looked at it afterwards.
Yeah, O.J. Howard could be a top 10 pick for sure. Just from what he's shown in college. But the last top 10 tight end to go was Eric Ebron, and he hasn't really done much. So that could
I think they're on 2 different levels of talent here, though, and that's what I was thinking was if Eric Ebron can go 10th overall, granted he was a good prospect, O.J. Howard should definitely be in the top 10, or at least in that conversation, because I think he is more talented than Eric Ebron is.
I agree, but I just feel like NFL teams might think, okay, is a tight end really worth a top 10?
And that depends on your team, right? So let's think about that just for a second before we go to our next topic. Is tight end a top 10 or a top tier need on the Patriots? Look at Dwayne Allen and Martellus Bennett and even Aaron Hernandez and Gronk. They always bring in a good tight end. To that team, they are.
Yeah.
When Jimmy Graham was on the Saints, was he a top-tier player on that team?
Yes.
When he left, did something from that offense disappear?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some teams that value tight end more than others. That's the problem, is then you have some team. I think Adam Gase down in Miami, he really values his tight end. That's why he made that trade for Julius Thomas. He wanted his big tight end back that he used to have in Denver. Some of these guys just value tight ends more than others, and that's where it's going to come into play of whether or not he goes in the top 10. Does the team utilize tight ends like a receiver, or do they utilize them more as a blocker?
And I feel like the teams that do put more worth into tight ends, they're the better teams when you look at them. So that's another reason they might not go top 10.
Because a tight end can be so versatile for you. He can be a sixth blocker on the offensive line, or he could be your best receiver on the team. And that's why when you have a guy like O.J. Howard, who I genuinely think could end up being, in my opinion, I would not be shocked if one day he is the best tight end in the NFL.
Oh, I wouldn't be shocked either.
And I think he's a very good run blocker. I mean, he's not like a tackle when it comes to blocking, but he's a pretty darn good blocker. And I think, in my opinion, he looks like a wide receiver when he catches the ball. He can make moves in open space. I think that he could be very soon and very quickly a Pro Bowl tight end. If not, even in his rookie year, I think he's that good.
Yeah, definitely. He's basically a receiver in a big linebacker body.
Yeah, I was to say he's huge, and I think if he goes to the right team that maybe doesn't have too many pressing needs, he could be a Pro Bowler as a rookie, which is kind of rare.